Welcome to Blonde Cards and Crafts. Let's make something together. So we're going to be using the Oh Santa November kit to make our 10 cards. So let's start with card number 1. And this card is going to be a 6x6 card, and it's a triple diamond point card. I have a card base here. It's a 6x6 card base, and you can make one yourself. You need a piece of card measuring 12x6 and score it at 6. And that'll give us our 6x6 card base. Now with this card base, we need to cut off this bottom piece. So we're going to mark up 2 inches from the bottom, and that then we will bring to our trimmer, or if you're really good with a scissors, you can use a scissors, but I'm going to cut that whole bottom piece off. Next, we have a matte piece of card, and this piece measures 5 3/4 by 3 3/4, and I have a pattern piece of paper that measures 5 1/2 by 3 1/2, and we're going to sit that on top of this blue piece. I will embellish it later on using the peel-offs, and you can see them there just to the right of the screen. I have 3 blue matte layers as well, and these measure 1 3/4 by 1 3/4. And then I have some pattern paper to go on top of those. Again, 3 of these measuring 1 1/2 by 1 1/2. And these are going to sit on 3 white squares, and we're going to make that from the piece we've cut off the bottom, the front of our card. I also have some mats and layers for inside. This blue piece measures 5 3/4 by 5 3/4, and then this white piece measures 5 1/2 by 5 1/2. And I've also got it stamped and ready to go using the stamps that came in the kit. This strip measures 1/2 inch by 5 1/2, and I'm going to sit that across the bottom, and I will embellish that as well using the peel-offs. So it'll just sit down there, and it'll bring the front of the card to the inside of the card. These are the peel-offs. They're holographic. I love them, and I'm going to use them to embellish the front and the inside of our card. I've also taken one of the dies from the die set we got. It's the banner die, and you can see it cuts out the centerpiece of the banner as well as 2 little pieces. Now I'm leaving the 2 little pieces either side out, just to give it the look of dimension on the card, and the blue piece I'm going to keep there. This piece is another die, and you can die cut out the Merry Christmas, or you can sit this piece down on the blue piece, pop back in the Merry Christmas letters, and then remove the large white piece, and it will leave your Merry Christmas, the little star and the little ivy or holly left behind. Now Alina from Ella Art and Crafts, she does this on her cards, but I'm just going to put the full white piece in. I've also taken 3 little star stickers. I stuck them down on some white cardstock and then fussy cut around them. I just felt it made them pop more. So now I have the card base, and you can see here that it's folded over, and I want to take a piece off the bottom. So I'm going to feed it through my pillar, my cutter, and I'm going to move it up to the 2 inch mark, and then I'm going to cut that off. So we have our card base now looks like this. This strip now we want to cut into 3 2 inch pieces. So again, I'll put it up to the 2 inch mark just there, and then I will cut up. Then I find if you use the blade pulling down, it pulls down on your paper, but if you use the blade like I am pushing up, then it pushes your paper up against the stopper, and you'll always get a good cut. So here we have our 3 2x2 squares, and they'll go with our blue and our pattern paper pieces. I have all my mats and layers already glued down and ready to go. So let's just finish up now by embellishing the card. Our 3 squares will go onto our 3 white ones, and then this panel will sit on the front of our card. So I'm going to speed everything up as we glue things down. I'll mostly be using my Collal Glue for my projects here. I find that when the Collal Glue dries, it gives a really nice strong finish. So I'll just adhere down the front, and you can see there I've already put down my peel-offs, and I used one of the widest peel-offs, and then 2 of the thinner peel-offs on that front of the card. I didn't put any on my little squares, I didn't feel they needed it, but I will embellish them using some stickers from the sticker sheet we got. So I'm going to glue the left hand square and the right hand square down, but with the middle square what I want to do is prop that up so it gives a little bit of dimension. So we only want to glue this square down, and it's sitting in a diamond shape to the front panel of our card. So you can see there I'm just putting a little bit of glue to the top of it, and I want to make sure that it's centered nicely on the back of our card base there. So I've cut down a couple of little pieces of foam tape, and I'm just getting an idea of how big I want them. Now that one under my thumb, the one that'll be at the top, it's a little bit too big, and I noticed that when I flip over the card front to have a look, but that's okay. I just peel it back a little and cut it off, and then I use my embossing friend just to take the sticky off it. Next I'm going to pop in my panel on the inside of our card, and I have that all ready to go and stuck down, and again I use the peel-offs on that as well. I'll use some liquid adhesive and I'll stick that panel down. Lovely. And now when you close that, you can see the piece of patterned paper behind. So I'm going to glue down my banner shape, and this is the outline of the banner shape, and I'm going to straddle that across the peel-offs, and then the sentiment is on some foam tape, so that's propped up. My little stars have a piece of foam tape behind those as well, and I'll add the 3 of them there. Now I don't have the 3 little squares there or diamonds at the bottoms embellished, but I'll do that later on. And now we're moving on to card number 2. This card is going to be an accordion fun fold card, and you can see the accordion part there on the left. I have a piece of cardstock measuring 12 by 7, and I have scored it in 4 places. The first place I've scored it is at 1 3/4, and I'm going to get out my scoring tool now to show you. So at 1 3/4 we'll score the whole way down. At 3 1/2 we'll score the whole way down. At 5 1/4, and again at 7. So this card will be a 5 by 7 card, but the accordion part will fold right up. So we're going to have a valley fold, then a mountain fold, then another valley fold, and a mountain fold. And you can see there all those folds sit nicely on our card, and that's what will give us our 5 by 7 card base. Lovely, different, and it looks lovely. I have it here on the table in front of me all finished, and it really is a nice card to look at. So we need to now put some pattern paper and some nice colored cardstock on our card base. Now because our base is a red, I'm going to go with a white matte layer and this blue lovely glitter patterned paper. I want 4 of these white mats, and they measure 1 1/2 by 6 3/4, and they'll sit in between each of our score lines like so. I have 4 of these strips of pattern paper. They're 1 1/4 by 6 1/2, and they'll sit on top of our white matte layer like that. Lovely. So that's those. The next then we need to embellish the right hand side, and I have a piece of white cardstock for that. This piece measures 4 3/4 by 6 3/4, and I will stamp my sentiment on there and a couple of the little present stamps that we got in our stamp set. I have a little strip of pattern paper here, and I'm going to stick that across the bottom. And this piece measures 4 1/2 by 3/4 of an inch. Next we have this panel, and this piece measures 6 by 4. I've scored it then at 3, and we're going to embellish this with 2 panels. I have 2 white matte layers, and they're 2 3/4 by 3 3/4, and on them I have used the stamps that I got in the kit. And I'm also going to use one of these little die cuts or cut aparts, and I just think it was so cute. It was the same color as the pattern paper. I've got some offcuts of the pattern paper and I'm going to embellish these as well using those. These little strips are, let me just see, 1/2 inch by 2 3/4. So lovely. Let's go ahead now and I'm going to glue all my mats and layers down. Again, I'm going to use some peel-offs. I'm going to use the green pinstripe peel-offs that I got as an add-on in my kit from Lizi. And they are available to purchase from the Love from Lizi website. So I have glued all my mats and layers together and now I'm just going to add them to my card base. So I'll add the 4 strips here between each of our score lines. And again, I'm using the Collal Glue for this. And you can see on the right and left sides of the pattern paper, I've added some of those green pinstripe peel-offs to it, as well as to the piece of pattern paper, which is below our stamped sentiment there in our center panel. So with this Jingle All the Way panel, we want to attach that to the accordion fold part of the card. We only need a little bit of glue on the right hand side and the left hand side. The rest will be free floating. I'm going to line up the score lines there and then just add a little bit of adhesive just to the very right hand side and the very left hand side. You can see me adding that there. And then I will pop that down, lining up the score lines there in the middle. And once that glue has dried, then our card is going to sit like so. And for a finish, I'm going to embellish the card using some of the sequins that we got in the kit. I'm going to use the red, the blue and the iridescent, which is kind of like a white, and it ties all the colors that's in our card together. So I'll stick them down using some of my white glue, my art glitter glue, and then what I'm going to do is take my glossy accents and I'm going to fill each of the sequins. I just like the look that that gives when the glossy accents dries. It dries clear and it dries solid. There's no tackiness on it at all. So there we go. There's our accordion fun fold card. And next we're moving on to card 3, and this card I'm calling a star front card. This piece I have here measures 9 by 6 and I've scored it at 3. So this is how our card will look with only half a card front. But we're going to add some pieces to that to give it a star shape. I've embellished some blue cardstock using the Snowflake Cluster stamp in a very similar colour ink. These 2 panels that I have here measure 2 3/4 by 5 3/4. And we'll put one of these on the outside and then the other panel will sit at the back of that on the inside. And I just thought it'd be nice to actually decorate the inside part of the card as well. Okay, so next we want to put some of our diamond shapes. And for this, we're going to need 2 white matte layers. And these measure 4 1/4 by 4 1/4. On top of them then I'm going to put these 2 blue layers and they measure 4 by 4. And you can see I've only embellished these around the outside with the stamp because you won't see the center part of it. So one of those will go on there and the other one will sit on this like that. So these then will sit on top of each other and that'll give us our star on the front. So this top piece here, I'm going to embellish that with some of the pattern paper. And this piece, it measures 3 3/4 by 3 3/4. And you'll see this on the front. I didn't feel you'd see enough of the pattern paper on the one behind, so I didn't put any on there. Okay, so I'm just going to show you how that's going to sit. Our points at the top and the bottom are going to meet up with our card front where it's cut there. So if I flip it over, you'll be able to see where they meet. Lovely. Now I have some layers to go inside the card. This blue matte layer is 5 3/4 by 5 3/4. Then my white layer measures 5 1/2 by 5 1/2. And I've taken a strip of the pattern paper. This is 1 inch by 5.5, and it'll sit across the inside of our card base like so. And it just pulls again the front of our card to the inside, and you'll see the bottom right hand corner of this. I've stamped this already using the Merry Christmas stamp as well as the star or snowflake cluster. I'm going to embellish the front of our star card using this piece. It was from a cut apart sheet. I've backed it with some white cardstock, and it's just under 2 3/4 by 2 3/4 really. I won't give you a measurement for it because it's just a piece that I cut off myself. So that'll sit on the front of our card. So I have all my mats and layers stuck down. I'm just going to now attach them to our card base. So I'm lining up the points on this one with the edge of the front of our card base, and I'm going to glue that down. And then I'm going to glue this piece down. Now I'm only going to put glue where this is going to sit on top. So hence the reason I'm not putting glue all over it. And that looks lovely there. I'm happy with that now. So I can pop the release paper off my foam tape. I would like to have had that as a diamond shape, but I think the square on square looks grand. And now we'll just add our mats and layers to the inside of our card, a lovely little place for us to write a sentiment to the person who's going to be receiving it. And there you go. There is our third card, our star front card, all done, short of embellishing it with a couple of the lovely gems that we got in the kit this month. And there's our finished card, and I have to say, I'm looking at this here, it stands up beautifully on the desk, and I just think it has a lovely look to it, very soft colors. So next we're moving on to card number 4, and card number 4 is an inside panels card. My card base measures 12 by 6, and I've scored it at 6. I'm going to sit a white mat on top of that as well as 2 inside. So we'll need 3 of these measuring 5 3/4 by 5 3/4. And I've used some of the silver peel-offs on the top and bottom of that piece. I have some pattern paper, and this measures 5.5 by 5.5. I was debating making it smaller so it would sit between the 2 peel-offs, but for a finish I've gone for this piece of 5.5 by 5.5. I like that it's just at the corners there. So that'll go on the front of our card base. I've taken one of the dies that we got in the August kit. It's a scalloped edge circle die, and I have die cut out a blue matte layer. Onto that then I have stuck down one of the tags that we got in the kit, and I have used some foam tape behind that. I'll take a little ribbon, and these were pre-tied bow ribbons that we got in the kit, and I'll sit that on top like so, and that'll be the front of our card. Inside our card we're going to use the other 2 white panels, and again I have the peel-offs on these, so they'll sit inside. Then on top of those I'm going to put my center panel piece, and this piece measures 12 by 4 3/4, and I've scored it at 3, 6 and 9. And we're going to accordion fold this, so we have a valley, a mountain and a valley fold. Now onto these panels we're going to put 4 white matte layers. They measure 2 3/4 by 4.5, and I have these horizontal strips on 2, and I have vertical strips on these 2, and they measure 4.5 by 1/2 and 2 3/4 by 1/2. So I'm going to stick down now the front of our card, and I have all the mats and layers there glued already just to add a little bit of speed. I'm then going to glue down our panel piece. I'll add some liquid adhesive to the back of this side. I'll make sure the border there at the top and bottom as well as on the right hand side is even, and then I'll add glue to this piece and fold it over. Now I'll give that time for the glue to dry, and while I'm waiting I'm going to embellish the front of the card. Again, I'm going to use these lovely little Diamante gems that we got in the card kit, and I'm going to scatter them around the front of our card, and I'll put an odd number down because it's always good and pleasing to the eye when we put odd numbers. So there's the inside of our card. It stands beautifully and I just love the look of this card, and it's not too thick either. So now let's move on to card number 5. I'm calling this card a lapel gatefold card. I have a card base measuring 12 by 6 and I've scored it at 3 and at 9. And then when we fold these over, we're then going to fold these corners back. Now you can just fold them over and they literally fold halfway down, and that'll give you the lapels, or you can mark 3 inches up from the bottom and use a scoreboard or a scoring tool. I have 3 pieces to go inside. This white card measures 5 3/4 by 5 3/4. I then have a piece of pattern paper, and this measures 5 1/2 by 5 1/2. And then I have this white piece that's going to go inside, and it measures 5 by 5. And as you can see, I've stamped this with our Merry Christmas and some of the little snowflakes inside as well. Okay, next we want to work on our gatefold parts. Now, this can look a little complicated, but it's not, honestly. So the easiest way to embellish the gatefold part is to cut a matte and pattern paper the full length of the gatefold, and then we'll do the lapels later. My white piece here measures 2 3/4 by 5 5/8, and we want 2 of those. The pattern paper measures 2 3/8 by 5, and we want 2 of those. Now you can see here I have one side already done. I have my white layer done where I have measured up and I have cut off the angle, and the same with my pattern paper. And those pieces that we cut off, we'll use those on the little lapels, so don't throw those away. Okay, so this piece I'm going to show you. We're going to measure up on the right and the left at 2 5/8. And when you put the mark on those, you're going to then cut from the 2 5/8 up to our right hand corner. And when you do it for the other side, you'll be cutting up to the left hand corner. So you can see here with the one I have, they are a mirror image is what we're going to be doing. With the patterned paper, we're going to cut up from the bottom left. I was just looking to see if I had the measurements wrote down, but we're going to cut up from the bottom left up to 2 1/2, and then we will cut across to the corner. And the same then with this piece, we'll mark up at 2 1/2 and then cut diagonally across to the right hand corner. So that will be our 2 sides. For the lapels, you can either use the pieces we've cut off, or you can take a white piece of card measuring 2 1/2 by 2 1/2 and cut from one diagonal corner to the other like I've done here. And that will give you our little white matte layers for on our lapel pieces. Or you can cut down the pieces that we cut already, but I just thought it'd be easier to show you this way. Our pattern paper, then we need a piece 2 by 2, and again I've cut through that diagonally, and that will give us our little pattern paper pieces for on there. Lovely. And so I'm only going to embellish the front of our card doing this. Now you can do another 2 for the inside of the card, but I was restricted by the pattern paper I had, so I only did the outside. Next we want to make our belly band, and this piece measures 12 by 2. I haven't scored this. What I have done is I have wrapped it around my card. I recommend that you wait until you have all your mats and layers on, and that way then when you wrap the belly band around, you'll get a true idea of the fit. Now you can see my piece doesn't meet in the middle, but that's okay because I have a piece of pattern paper that's going to straddle across there. So here's my piece of pattern paper, and this piece measures 1 3/4 by 5 3/4, and then I've taken this little tag that came in the kit and I'm going to sit that on the front. I've got some ribbon that matches the color of my pattern paper, so I'm going to make a bow to cover over the hole where the tag is. So I have glued my mats and layers for the inside, I've glued them together, and now I'm going to stick them down into the card base. Once I've that done, then I will add the mats and layers for the outside of our card, and you can see that they all sit nicely together and fit in there nicely. Once I have these two on, then we can put our little lapel pieces on to our card. And I have to say, I'm not great at maths. I loved the idea of this card, but when you're working in things that are like 3/8 and 5/8, oh my gosh, my head just goes to mush. But I really am, I'm pleased with the outcome of this card. I think it looks so cute. And even though it's a Christmas card, I do love the colors. They're not your traditional colors for a Christmas card. They do have some red and green in the icons and the images in there, but no, I have to say I love this. I think it's really cute. So now I'm just going to attach my belly band pieces, and you can see here I'll put the glue on the actual brown piece of the belly band wrap rather than on the pattern paper because of that gap in the middle. But our pattern paper will tie them together, and we want to make sure that that slides up and down easily, but that it doesn't slide off by itself. So I'm going to put some foam squares behind where our tag will go. It'll just give it a bit of dimension, and it helps that when the tag, when the belly band is pushed up under the lapels, the tag kind of sits over the lapels, and it keeps them in place. There's not a whole lot of depth on this card, so it'll fit nicely into a 6x6 envelope. So now we're going to move on to card number 6, and this will be a curved front card. Our card base measures 12 by 6, and I've scored it at 6. And on this piece we're going to do a little bit of cutting. We're going to come down about 1.25 inches there, and we're going to come up from the front here. On this right hand side, we're going to come up there by 2 inches. So I'm going to draw a line using my ruler and pencil as a guide. I'm going to cut this using my scissors, but you can do it on a trimmer or you can use a craft knife, whatever you feel most comfortable with. So we're going to cut off this piece. As you can see, I've marked down 1.25 inches on the top left, and I've marked up 2 inches from the bottom right. So I'll cut that off now in a minute. First I want to look at the mats and layers for the front. This white piece is 5 3/4 by 4 3/8, and I'm going to cut up on the right hand side at 1 3/4. So I'll mark 1 3/4 there, and then I'm going to cut from that mark diagonally across to the left hand side, and that'll fit in there lovely. Next, our patterned paper piece that we have there. This piece measures 5.5 by 4 1/8. And again, I'll cut that diagonally across. I'm cutting up from 1.5 inches on the right hand side. So it'll be 1.5, and then we'll cut diagonally up to the left hand corner. And that'll give us our front mats and layers there on this card. Okay, so inside then we have our patterned paper pieces and our white card piece for our sentiment. Our patterned paper measures 5 3/4 by 5 3/4, and this piece here, this measures 5 by 5. I wanted to see some of the patterned paper behind it. I didn't want too much of that white covering the front there. So I have punched out a little 1 3/4 inch scalloped punch piece, and then I've taken one of the images from the cut apart sheet, and I am going to use that as the stopper here on the bottom right hand corner. I've also put on one of the ribbon bows that came in the kit as well. This is a banner that I've die cut using the die from the kit, and I've stamped directly onto the banner piece itself. I have some foam tape on the back, but I have too much on. You only want a little piece in the middle, but I'll cut that excess off shortly. Okay, so now I'm going to cut the card base, and to do that I'm using my scissors, and I'm going to do my best to cut straight along that line. I struggle at cutting a straight line and I will come back and tidy it up a little later, and I do try not to pull the paper when I'm cutting into the corner, hence the reason you saw me going back and forth there. Okay, so now I'm going to cut the white piece, and I'm using my trimmer for that, my little Fiskars trimmer. And then again, I'm going to do the same with my patterned piece, and I'm going to use the trimmer again for that. Lovely. And they sit in there nicely. I'm happy with that. So now I'll just rub out any pencil markings that's on there. And I'm going to curve my papers there a little bit, as well as the front of the card base. Not too much. It's just enough that when we tuck it under our little piece, that they will tuck under nicely and they'll curve nicely. And I find the Collal glue, when it sets nice and hard and solid, so it will hold the curve a little bit when it's set. So there's the front pieces on. There you go. I'm just trimming off the little bit of excess. Now we'll add the inside pieces. I love that. Perfect. So now I'll just faddle about with the front of that so that my stopper, it'll sit nicely there and the front piece will sit under it. I think using a rectangular stopper might have set better along that edge there, but this does work nicely. And you can see there I've curved up that little edge there along the right, which will sit under my stopper piece. I'm going to attach my banner, and I'm going to glue that down using one of my glues. I think that's my art glitter glue that I'm using. So I'll glue this whole thing down onto the front of the card base. And then this piece, I'm just going to have a little bit of foam tape in the middle, so that when the card front is curved, this piece will actually sit up from the curve. And it works out perfectly. I'm delighted with that. So once I have that then in place, I'll just faff around with the curve on the front of the card, making sure that it sits nicely under. And you can see there, I'm just folding that front right edge up a little bit so it sits underneath my little stopper. Now I have taken a 6x6 handmade little box envelope, and I'll leave link to this one that I use down below in the description. And my card sits in there perfectly when it's not, you know, tucked into the topper. Once you take it out, it's pretty much, you can see where it needs to be tucked in. So this is the finished envelope and card. And now we're going to move on to card number 7, and this is a vertical easel card. So I've made a 5x7 card base, and for that you need a piece of card measuring 10x7, and I've scored it at 2.5 and 5. And then we will fold that in half, and then the second fold becomes a mountain fold. So there are 2 mountain folds that we have there, and it looks like a standard easel card, but we're going to sit it up on its end, just like that, and it's going to be fabulous. So onto that we need some mats and layers for the front of our easel card, and these 2 pieces of pattern paper measure 2.25 by 6 3/4. In front of that then I have cut out this image of the Christmas tree, and this was a large piece of patterned paper with the Santa image that you can see there on the right, this little one here. I fussy cut around that, and then I used a die from my stash to die cut out the Christmas tree. I used a die from the kit for this Noel, and I cut it out 3 times and I stuck those together. So I have a 3-dimension thick little star as well as Noel on the front. I did die cut out a smaller rectangular square in 300 GSM cardstock to give strength to my patterned paper piece. So it's going to straddle our score line here, our mountain fold, and for that to sit on there, I'm going to use this piece. This is our mechanism piece. It measures 6 by 3/4 of an inch, and I've scored it at 1, 2, 4 and 5. Then we do a valley fold, a mountain fold, a mountain fold and a valley fold. And where those 2 valley folds meet in the middle, where it has like little legs, this part here is going to straddle our score line on our card, like so. So the little tabs of an inch on either side, they're going to sit underneath our pattern paper, just like that. So you won't see how that's attached to our easel card. Now in hindsight, I think I should have made this piece 6 by about 3 inches, so there would be more of it to stick onto our Christmas tree focal point. But this does work, it works perfectly. So you can do it as long as it's 6 inches and scored, as I've said, it's fine. How deep it is up to yourself. Okay, so on our card base, I have this white matte layer, and I've actually cut out 2 of these, and they measure 4 3/4 by 6 3/4. One will go on the inside and the other will go on the back of our card. We need a little stopper for our easel, and I'm going to use my Santa for that. And you would have seen I have some foam tape on the back of him. It lifts him up off the card base and it gives our easel something to sit against. I've also used the Ho 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 dies that came in the kit, and I've die cut them onto some card. I also put some foam tape behind that, so when I lift out the hose, they'll be dimensional, and I'll put them above where our Santa will be. This is the back piece. As I said, it's 4 3/4 by 6 3/4, and it's for somewhere to write your sentiment. I don't want to write on the piece that has our Santa and our hose. I'm going to write the message on the back of the card, so it'll be hidden when the card is standing. Otherwise, we'd have to keep our message to the part underneath where the easel piece is. This little piece of patterned paper, it's just an offcut I have, and it measures 3/4 of an inch by 4 3/4. So now I'm going to stick down my mats and layers and then assemble the rest of the card. I've glued down my white mat inside as well as my mat on the back with the pattern paper strip. Next, I want to put on my mechanism. We need to do this first before we put our pattern paper over it. So the little legs here, we're going to add some glue. I'm using my art glitter glue because it's a quick grab glue, and I want to make sure that that's set there. And like I said, this piece isn't very wide. It does hold my image, my focal point on the front, but I think in hindsight I should have made this bigger. So it's up to yourself, whatever you feel yourself. So I have set that down over the score line. We're gluing it down so that where they join there, you can just see where they meet up, those little tabs meet up in the middle. That is where our score line is. And I'm just giving this time for the glue to set before I press on the easel part. And you can see there how our mechanism will move and will lift. So our focal point will lift up as we fold our easel into place. Now we can glue down our pattern papers and it'll cover those little tabs. And that'll be wonderful. And then we'll have our large focal point on the front, which I think is fabulous. I really wanted to do something special with this, and I think this is pretty cool. So I'll add glue to the tab there, and then I will make sure and center that piece on top of the front of the card. Lovely. Now we just need our stopper in place so our easel will stay open. And take the release paper off the foam tape, and then I will sit that down into that corner there, bottom right hand corner, nicely, and that'll give our easel somewhere to sit up against. I'll then add my first hoe, makes me laugh every time, and then put the other 2 hoes in descending order above our Santa. So you can see there to the left of our hose and our Santa, you could write a message, but for me, I've put the piece on the back so I can put my message there. So there we are with an easel card, and it's, you know, I love that it's different. It doesn't sit the way you would expect an easel card to sit. I love that it's shaped like this, and it really does look nice. It's here in front of me, and I do love it, especially the sparkle on the Christmas tree. Okay, so now we're moving on to card 8, and I'm calling this a cutaway panel card. My card base measures 7.5 by 6, and I've scored it at 1.5. I have another piece here, and this piece is 1.5 by 6, and this is going to be the end piece of our card base. This piece will straddle those two, and it'll give us our full card base. And this piece measures 5 3/4 by 3.5. This is going to be a top folding card, so this is the orientation it's going to sit in. I have a piece of pattern paper here, and this measures 5 3/4 by 5 3/4, and it'll sit inside our card base like so. I have this white piece of cardstock. This is our center panel for our sentiment inside, and it measures 5 1/4 by 3.5. Our red panel will sit over this, so when the card is closed, you won't see the white panel behind it. So once we sit our red piece in behind, we can then close the top of the card base down and then add this piece to the bottom. So we'll end up with a 6 by 6 card base. I have two pieces of pattern paper as well. These two strips measure 5 3/4 by 1 1/4, and the bottom one there, it has the Happy Christmas sentiment there across the bottom. I've taken one of these tags, and it came in the kit, and I've covered the hole with one of the ready-made bows. So now I have my mats and layers all glued together. It's just a matter of putting this piece at the bottom and then sticking the center panel to the top. And I put a pencil line there so I would know how far to bring my glue down. I didn't want to come down too much. And once I have the top glued down to the center panel and the bottom piece in place, we have our 6 by 6 card base. Now I'm going to put on my tag. I've put some foam tape behind that so it'll rise it up off the front. Adds a little bit of dimension to the card front. And I'll just faff there with the bow. So now we have our center panel for our sentiment. I'm adding some glue to the back. I'm going to sit it behind the front with the glue to the back. That way when I lie it down flat, it'll be in the right position. My Collal Glue gives me a little bit of wiggle room in case I need to move it a little to the left or to the right. But there you go. There is our cutaway panel card. It's such a simple card, but I think it looks lovely, and it's so different from what you buy in the shop. I'm going to embellish it using some sequins that came in the kit. I'm gluing them down using my art glitter glue, and then I'm going to fill those sequins using my glossy accents. And it's good to give the glossy accents about 48 hours to make sure they're well dry before you then, put any weight on them. Next, we're moving on to card number 9, and this is like our bendy card that we've made before, but for this one I have some score lines through the center, and I'm also using another little mechanism so we'll have our sentiment can pop up. I have one of the die cut tags left, and I've stamped this sentiment, the Jingle All the Way. I'm not sure whether I'm going to use both or just one. We won't be using a traditional card base for this, just a piece of cardstock measuring 6 by 6, and we'll score that at 3 inches. We'll need 2 pieces of pattern paper as well as 2 pieces of white cardstock. We'll put our sentiment and images on these for the back. These 2 pieces measure 2 3/4 by 5 3/4. And the same for the white pieces, that'll go on the back. So next we're going to look at our back center panel, and for that we will need a piece of cardstock which measures 5 by 5. I've scored this at 1/2 inch, 2.5 and 4.5, and we're going to fold those or burnish those score lines in the mountain folds. So there's this one, then the center, and then the other side. And those little tabs, we're going to use them to glue down this piece to our panel. Onto that then we're going to embellish it with some of the pattern paper, and I'm going to use some of my blue pattern paper with these lovely sparkly stars. These 2 pieces, they measure 1 3/4 by 4 3/4, and they'll sit nicely on there. Then we have our middle center panel. This piece measures 6 by 3.5, and I've scored it at 1/2, 3 and 5.5. Again, we'll fold them the same as the other one, all mountain folds. We'll add some glue to these little tabs and that'll sit over our back panel just like so. I've got some pattern paper for this and they are 2 1/4 by 3 1/4 and we'll need again 2 of those. And then finally we have our front center panel. This is going to straddle the whole of our card back panel. So this piece measures 7 by 2 and I've scored it at 1/2, 3.5 and 6.5. Again, we'll fold these into mountain folds and we'll be able to put some glue on the back of these tabs. This piece will sit across the whole length of our card panel, just like that. I again have 2 pieces of pattern paper that's going to sit on the front of this piece, and those panels will measure 2 3/4 by 1 3/4, and these panels have sentiments on the pattern paper, so I thought it was cool to have the merry and bright kind of the focal images there on that. I also have 2 mechanisms here. I was debating using the 2 of these, the tab and my stamp sentiment. I'm going to use the stamp sentiment and I'm going to use a little tag on these. These mechanisms measure 5 by 1/2 and I've scored them at 1/2, 1.5, 3.5 and 4.5. And these are the same mechanisms that we put on our vertical easel card. So we'll put glue on the little legs of these and this will straddle where our score line is in the middle. So now let's assemble our card. I've got my pattern paper here and this was cut from one piece of pattern paper, these 2 panels. So I want to make sure that they're in the right orientation. So I'll stick this one down first and then I'll glue down my other piece. And again, I'm using the Collal glue for this. Once I've those 2 down, then I can stick down my back center panel. I'll put the pattern paper onto this first because it'll be easier to do it this way. So I'm going to use my art glitter glue to glue these down. It's quick grab. So we'll put one down and then the other. And once they're in place, then we can put some glue on our tabs. And I'm going to make sure now that the center score line lines up with the center score line on this back panel. Lovely. Now we'll do the same with our middle center panel. We'll put down our little pattern papers. And then once they're glued down, we can add some glue to our tabs. And again, the center score line there, we'll line that up with our score lines underneath. Fold under our tabs and then press down. It's starting to look a bit like a Christmas cake or a wedding cake, which would be a great idea for this card as a wedding card. Okay, so now I'm going to put my front center panel down and then I'll add on the pattern papers to this. Once that's down, then we can focus on our mechanism. And I just love how this stands. It's a real mantle pleaser, I think. So I debated where I was going to put these pieces, whether I'd put one or both, and for a finish I'm going to put one on the top tier. I'm going to put my stamped Jingle All the Way piece down there. I added one of the ready-made bows to that piece, and what I'm going to do is take one of the little stickers of the holly and I'm going to add that there to where the way is in our Jingle All the Way. I'll just pop it there. I've also used the second mechanism at the bottom on our front center panel, and I've used one of the tags that came in the kit, and now I have some of the cut aparts and I've cut out 2 of these and I'm going to put these on the center panel. I've put some foam tape behind them so there's a little bit of dimension. On the back I used again some of the cut apart pieces that came on the sheet, and I'm also going to put 2 of the stickers on either side. And I just think that looks lovely. I'm delighted with it. I think very cute. So now we're finished with card number 9 and we're going to move on to card number 10, which isn't a card at all. It's going to be a gift box. So I have a piece of cardstock here which measures 11 by 8, and this cardstock came in the kit. We need to make some score lines on this. So our first one will be at 1 3/4. Then our next one will be at 5 1/4. Our next one will be at 7. And then our last one will be at 10 1/2. And that little 1/2 inch tab there at the end, that's where we're going to glue our box together. Now I hope you can see the score lines there. Now we need to rotate our piece of cardstock, and we're going to put a score line here. And this score line is at 1 1/2 inches, and it's right down to the bottom. So at 1 1/2 inches, we're going to score down. Lovely. Next, I want to flip over my cardstock. I'm going to take a pencil and my ruler, and I'm going to put a little mark here at the top at 5 1/2. I'm also going to put a little mark down at the bottom at 5 1/2. And then once I have that done, I'm going to join the two dots together using my ruler. This line is just it's an indicator line for us when we go cutting later on. We're going to cut down as far as this line, but I didn't want to put a score line here because otherwise you would see it on the outside of the box. But it's up to you. If you'd prefer to have a score line here, you certainly could put one, but I went with a pencil. So I have a tag and another little piece from the sheets that we got, and I've just wrote to and from at the back, and I've used some skinny ribbon from my stash. I have two pieces of cardstock here, and these measure 3 1/4 by 3 3/4, and then two skinny pieces measuring 1 1/2 by 3 3/4, and these 4 pieces will decorate our box. I was thinking about using this ribbon to decorate my tag, but I went with the little winter wishes piece instead. And I have some ribbon from my stash as well. This I got in a previous Love from Lizi kit, and we'll use this to tie the box. Okay, so let's put the scoreboard away now. We're going to do some cutting. So you can see there I have the tab orientated to the left hand side. Our pencil line is to the top, and we're cutting up these score lines to our first score line there along the bottom. Now I'm being nice and neat and tidy because I want to actually cut the larger pieces so there's no score line. So the score lines are on these little side pieces, and I'm going to cut them away. These little wedges will allow these little flaps to sit nicely at the base or the bottom of our box. Now I've rotated it around the pencil line, and I'm going to cut down along this score line. I'm actually going to cut out the score line. So I'm cutting on either side, and then I'll nip it away there right down at the pencil line. And I'm going to do this along all these score lines, and I'm going to be nice and tidy about it because this is going to be the top of our box. So when our recipient opens the box and opens the ribbon, they'll see all these edges. So we want them to be nice and tidy, and that's why I'm cutting away the score line. We'll cut the score line away and this tab away here, and we'll put a little wedge as well. Okay, now all I need to do is take away my pencil line because we don't want people to see that when they look inside the box. So I've just used my eraser to rub out that pencil line. Okay, so I'm going to burnish our little tab because we want to put glue on that, and I'm going to fold and burnish all the other score lines as well. Now you can see there the tab is to the middle, just in there. We're going to add some liquid adhesive to that. Now you can use double-sided tape if you like, but I'm using a liquid adhesive, and then we're going to fold over this little one on top of it, and I'm going to give it time for the glue to adhere and to set. And you can see there I'm folding it over back and forth, and it sits lovely. So now we'll add our pattern papers. So again, I'm going to use liquid glue here just to allow me a little bit of wiggle room to get them on straight. I'm focusing my paper down there towards the bottom score line. I want to make sure it's nice and even on those three sides because we've no score line to kind of judge it against at the top. So again, I'll put my little piece of pattern paper there, make sure it's even and nicely centered between the three score lines there, and then we can flip it over and we can do the other side. And one of these now will be our front, so we want to make sure that it's down nice and straight. And then for our final piece, we'll glue that down. Lovely. And there we have our box. All we need to do now is fold down our tabs and fold in and glue that down. So I want to make sure that the back of my box, that I have my tabs folded over the right way so I don't see that side edge. So I'm going to add glue to our two tabs, then I'll add a bit of glue onto this piece here and then glue that down. Now you could leave this until you're ready to give the box away or put something in it, and you could keep it folded flat in your craft room. You could go ahead and do this part though, and that's putting our two punched holes out here along the top so we can feed our ribbon into it. I have these little mini pegs. I got them for doing my crochet. I find them so handy in the craft room. So that'll hold my top together, and then I can use the edge of the pegs there as a guideline for my punch. So I'll know that they're the same depth in on both sides. So now it's just a matter of feeding the ribbon through and tying a bow. And I'm not going to put you through the pain of watching me tie a bow. Through the magic of editing, there you go, there's our bow. And there you go. All we need to do now is add our little tag. And isn't that a wonderful little gift box using the Oh Santa November card kit from From Lizi. So here's the three boxes I've made. One of them was using a different kit. And I'm going to leave you now with images of all the cards and the gift box that we've made. If you liked my video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. If you're a subscriber, thanks for subscribing. And if not, click on the little bell icon down below. That way you'll be notified each time I post a new video. You can find me on social media. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter and Reddit. And I hope that if you make any of these cards that I've shared with you here today, that you'll tag me on social media. I'd love to see what you've made. So that's it. Until next time, stay safe folks, and bye for now.